It's just a conversation with a fellow clown. It's not very serious, we're clowning around. It's really just a clown-versation. Hello, welcome everybody. It's time for another Clown-versation. That was smooth. Everything around here is very tightly controlled. We're slick. We have it down. We rehearsed. We're clowns. Come on, you people. Welcome to Clown-versations. I am Barnaby. I am founder of Clown Spirit, where we take the power of clowning. We use it to bring more lightness, joy, and connection to your life and the lives of everybody around you. That is what we're all about, bringing more clowns into the world, unleashing them, because let's face it, it's kind of what we need right now. And somebody said to me the other day, clowns need to be leading the revolution right now. So come on out. Let's revolt wherever we are. Today, I'm going to be talking to a wonderful clown, David Bridel, the founder and director of the Clown School in LA. I don't know why I said it like that. And we're going to be talking in just a moment. But first of all, I want to let you know about a couple of exciting things coming up in Clown Spirit. This Saturday, we have Danielle Levsky teaching a workshop called Fool's Yoga, which is going to be kind of what it says on the tin. It's going to be blending the wonderful asanas and breath work of yoga with the playfulness of clowning. It's going to be really awesome. That is our Clown Spirit Village masterclass for the month. And then coming up very soon in July, we have Eric Davis, the masterful bouffon and clown himself, the Red Bastard, is going to be teaching a masterclass for us on bouffon, which is just going to be awesome. So if you want a little bit of relaxing clown playfulness yoga this weekend, and you want a bit of like crazy, let's get our bouffon on in July, then check out Clown Spirit Village, clown-spirit.com/village, and check out the deals that we have there for joining. We have an amazing kind of tiered pay what you can system. So whatever your circumstances and your resources, we hope that it's accessible for you to be able to join and benefit from the resources and the support that we offer at Clown Spirit Village. All right, everybody. Are we ready to jump into this Clown-versation with David? As we get into this Clown-versation, please jump into the chat, especially if you're watching on YouTube. We are streaming, by the way, to 3 different platforms. We're streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram simultaneously by the magic of the internet. And if you're on YouTube and you put chat into the chat thing there, we can read it. We can respond to your questions. So please do that. We'd love this to be interactive and for you all to be involved. David Bridel, everybody, who is waiting backstage right now very patiently, is a globally recognized artist, educator, and leader in the field of clown movement and performance. He is founder and artistic director of the Clown School. He spent over 30 years teaching and directing across the US, across the world. His work bridges stage, screen, opera, and education with credits that include ABC's Dancing with the Stars, Center Theatre Group, and Los Angeles Opera. His teachings have impacted students at NYU, UCLA, Cal Arts, and beyond, and his students now perform in major film and television roles. He has books and articles galore, in particular, a seminal book on clowning, Clowns in Conversation, which was a series of amazing interviews with great clowns from around the world, and more newly published, Send in the Clowns, which is all about humanitarian clowning. He's trained and collaborated with leading figures in the world of clown, all of them. So, well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. And we're going to find out more about that in just a moment, because right now, I want to welcome onto the Clown-versation stage, Mr. David Bridel.
Look at that. Oh, a big audience gathered there, Barnaby. Impressive. Are they all in
Hundreds and hundreds of people. They're cheering. They want more. Okay. All right. Settle down, people. Settle down.
That's a busy living room you have right there.
They stopped very suddenly then.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? Well, they know how to take a cue and just cut it.
Hi. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Barnaby. That's a privilege.
All right. I'm kind of out of breath now from all that talking. So
yeah, you did a lot. Yeah. Cool stuff you have coming up, though, Danielle and Eric, on the docket for the next month or so. That's very different, very wonderful opportunities for people to experience clowning with a twist, right? So that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's right. I like that, clowning with a twist. We could market that.
We could. Maybe a lemon twist. Clowning on.
Oh, no, that was more like pepper. I was doing pepper there.
No, you are. Yeah.
Lemon would. How would you do lemon?
You'd squeeze it. You'd have to squeeze it on a thing.
Oh yeah, you squeeze it on the thing like that.
Yeah, that's right.
My kids actually used to eat lemons.
Oh yeah, my son eats lemons. Yeah, quite like.
Yeah.
It. Raw.
Yeah. Well, how else would you eat a lemon other than raw?
Well, yeah, you wouldn't cook it. Cooked lemons, quite a delicacy, you know.
Well, I suppose you add it to things that you're cooking.
Yeah, you can. That's true.
Yeah. Are you a cook?
Yes, moderately. I have a ratatouille on the stove as we speak. So, I go that far.
Check you out. That's amazing. Yeah. That's fancy. And it's a slow cooking thing, right? Like
it's a slow cook. Exactly.
With the aubergine.
Yes. Eggplant. And nobody knows if you don't even nobody understands that word here, Barnaby. You gotta get with the times.
That's why I said it, because like you would that secret language.
Yeah. I guess it's a French word, probably. I don't know. Anyway,
how long have you lived in the States? Remind me.
It's almost 30 years now. I think I moved here in 98. So whatever that is, 27 years.
That's a really long time.
It is, yeah. Longer than you, possibly, or you?
Yeah. I mean, I only moved here for the first time in 2005 or 6, and then since then I've gone back to the UK for a period of time and kind of gone back and forth. But
I've been here all that time. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your sort of impulse for coming in the first place?
Initially, it was a relationship that brought me to New York, and I spent about 7 years there, and then work and family brought me to LA. So, but I never really wanted to go back once I'd arrived. So I've always enjoyed living and working here.
Yeah, interesting. And how is it right now in LA? Because things are pretty hot right now. I mean,
they are,
but like.
Yeah, I just moved out of Los Angeles itself, so I'm up the coast by a little stretch. So it's difficult to tell. I was in LA the last couple of days. Things seem to be normal, but the city is so vast, it's impossible to tell. So I don't know, really. It's hard to capture through any one person's experience what's really going on, but difficult times.
Really difficult. And I mean, LA has just been the center of so much drama and I don't know if crisis is the right word, but the last year or so with the fires as well, which affected you. And
that's true. Yeah. That's the reason.
This is okay to talk about, right? This is sort of public knowledge anyway, but because I mean, how are things? You lost your house.
That's right. That's why I'm not living in LA, because we moved just a little ways out of town. But recovery is happening, and we're not unique. There's so many thousands and thousands of people that lost their homes, and everyone chooses their own way forward to try to put life back together again. So we're doing okay, and I'm happy to say that the Clown School is kind of a mainstay of life and work, just continuing to do what we do there. So I feel fortunate that we're all managing to kind of keep looking forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I mean, I suppose it's something that you never imagine is going to happen to you until it does one of those things. Right?
No, I tell you what, I will say this, that's absolutely true. And it's still shocking to think back to, and it's only 4 months ago now, like, you know, one day there was this life and then the very next day there wasn't. But I do, with a certain degree of gallows humor, I sort of look at life nowadays through tinted disaster glasses. And like, well, this will last for as long as it lasts, but it's a detachment practice, let's put it that way. So
that's very cool. I like that. Tinted instead of rose tinted spectacles, it's like
disaster tinted spectacles.
Disaster tinted. I think we should all go around with those.
Yeah.
Disaster tinted. I have this app on my phone that I just put on, which is called Croak. We Croak.
I've heard of that.
We Croak. And it sends you notifications 3 or 4 times a day saying, remember, you're going to die.
Are you enjoying that?
I kind of am.
Yeah.
You know, it drops you right back into the moment.
Yes, I bet it does. I bet it does.
And you know, I can go a whole day without sometimes without really having that.
That reality check?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm just so taken up with whatever I'm doing.
Absolutely. Well, I noticed that as time has passed, that thought circles around more frequently than it used to. You know, when you're in your 20s and 30s, just
well, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Croak.
We Croak.
We Croak. Okay.
Yeah.
Some marketing wizard came up with that idea.
Yeah. It's quite good. And it also brings up quotes. You know, if you click on the notification when you get it, it gives you like some interesting quote about death.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of cool. That the latest one is by Susan B. Anthony, and it says, cautious, careful people always casting about to preserve their reputations can never affect a reform. That's not one of the best ones, but it's interesting.
It's a good quote. Doesn't seem to be on brand particularly, but
no, they lost it. They've lost the thread. I suppose if they're going to try and come up with 4 quotes every day about death,
yeah, that's tricky.
You have to cast the net quite widely.
Yeah. Have they quoted Goethe's famous last words? More light. That would be a good one.
More light.
That was the last thing he said, apparently.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
I like that. I'm writing it down.
Okay,
so,
good.
You know, I can use it maybe.
Yeah, you'll find a way.
in the moment.
Yes.
So let's relate this back to clown a little bit. So you just mentioned gallows humor, and you know, has clowning helped you get through this? Does it help you get through?
Well, it has in a practical way, as I said, just having the consistency of, you know, showing up to work, although, you know, that could be any job. But I will say something miraculous happened not long after the fires. I was teaching a sort of a standard class, a regular class. It was maybe 2 weeks afterwards, and I just sat down with my group of students to kind of begin the session when there was a very loud, interruptive, caterwauling noise outside of the room. And to my profound confusion, I went over and opened the door. Actually, I didn't go. The door just burst open, and a troop of I don't know, probably about 50 clowns came parading in and staged an intervention, which was quite moving, I must tell you, at that time. Well, it was then and it is now. Really a kind of a beautiful event. And I recognized in practice in that moment, in a way that I have always known in theory, that among other things, clowning is a deeply communal activity. And it binds people together from all corners of life and all different kinds of human being. Something about the nature of clowning is a kind of a glue. And some folks that walked in that door that day I hadn't seen for almost up to 10 years, but still carrying the clown spirit with them, and they still felt the call to come and, you know, make a noise when it was a healing sound for me. And so it's really a very notable experience. I was profoundly humbled by that.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? I sort of wonder sometimes with, we come to clown maybe for whatever reason that's personal, but there's something about the community that's the glue that keeps us there.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe that's true of many things. I don't know.
I think it must be. I mean, we only know the path we take, right? But I do suspect that there's something about the sort of going through the eye of the needle when you're training as a clown. You kind of have to shed something, and you're shedding it in the presence of peers, and those peers are also being asked to do the same thing. So everyone is having this parallel challenge, and that builds some kind of connectivity. One of the true joys with the clown school nowadays, I'm finding as time passes, is watching how sort of generations of students will go through a sequence of classes together and find some kind of bonding that way. And then later they'll get introduced to a new generation that's gone through the same sequence, but 1 year later or 1 year earlier. And then new bonds form as the more and more fruit grows on the tree. I really, really think that's so invaluable. And as a teacher nowadays, I go into these experiences hoping that the ultimate fruits of my labor I will never see, because they'll be about those relationships that form professional, creative, personal, domestic, that just go off and sort of take care of themselves. I really love that about this community that we're a part of.
What classes are you teaching at the moment?
Just finished a Commedia dell'arte 2 class, which was culminating a presentation to an audience in a little cabaret space in LA yesterday. It was great fun. And then the night before that, I finished a Clown 2 class, which is a study of clown archetypes. So those were the two that have been most kind of present in the last few weeks. And then after a short break, I'm doing a reading of a play, and then we're going on to Clown 3. And some of my summer intensives are coming up in July, both clowning and miming.
What's the progression? Can you give us a very general overview of 1, 2,
Sure.
3? How does that
Yeah,
work?
1, 2, 3 is, I mean, it's fairly simple. In Clown 1, you're just introduced to the whole premise of meeting yourself through failure, working with opposition and topsy-turviness, learning, as I've heard it said, and I really love, to balance the cosmos with, the other side, the shadow, the part of you that is often hidden. Then in Clown 2, we move into the world of 2 specific archetypes, the red and the white clown, otherwise known as the August and the Joey, looking at low status and high status, both separately and together. And that's a very theatrical class where people are asked to dress up in costumes and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And then Clown 3 takes what we've learned in the first 2 and turns it into some kind of a show. In a very humble fashion, we put together about an hour's worth of material and then just share it with other members of the community. So that's the journey. And if you happen to join Clown 1 and go all the way through to the end of Clown 3, the classes meet once a week, and it takes about 4 or 5 months to get through that whole thing. And then I do it again in the second part of the year, so I get through 2 cycles every year. And then separate from that, I'll teach a ton of other classes: commedia, mime, jester. I have an acting studio, and and all different kind of branches of clowning, plus some movement class as well. So
it's always interesting. It's always really interesting to see how people how teachers kind of construct the journey.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. What comes first and how they develop that. I suppose it's quite common that creating a show or something presentational is sort of a goal, one of the sort of outcomes towards the end of that. Yeah. But you also now in the clown school have quite a focus on humanitarian clowning.
That is true. Yeah. Which is a big new area for me, new within the last 4 or 5 years. And I haven't practiced in that field, but I have done a lot of research and a lot of writing about it. And I've met and been stunned by the work of so many of these artists. So yeah, we've begun to offer it through the school in terms of classes, and every year we also offer a Humanitarian Clowning Award, which is simply a way to try to support organizations that are doing this work. So we have
I love that idea. What a beautiful thing, an award.
Yeah. I mean, we have 2 winners of the award this year, Clowns Without Borders, and then an organization in Mexico called Love and New. And both of them, this was not intentional, but it so happens that both organizations are currently working with people who are being forced to move. They call it forced migration, people displaced. And so, what we're able to do is offer some support to their existing missions that allow them to continue their work, which is really cool.
Yeah. I'm curious how, well, first of all, who is teaching humanitarian clowning and how is it taught?
Yeah, great question. So Raquel Gendry is our, for the clown school, is our sort of humanitarian medical clown in situ. She's worked predominantly as a medical clown. She started in Ecuador and has been doing this work for 25 years, I think, and is a wonderful teacher. I mean, she understands the inside of a hospital like nobody's business. So in the work, she's able both to teach the kind of methodology as it specifically relates to hospital clowning, and also pass on information about the protocols, which are pretty important for clowns going into that kind of environment. And then the humanitarian piece is really just, in some ways, you could argue, is an extension of what happens in medical clowning, or you could put it another way and say the humanitarian umbrella includes hospital clowning and clowning in refugee camps and so on. And there are similarities and differences between those 2 sort of twigs on the branch. But Raquel is able to address them through her work. She's done both. And, I think it's an exciting growth area. I talked to a guy in Europe by name of Giora Siliga, who runs an organization called Red Noses International. And he said that his organization plus other humanitarian organizations employ more clowns than the circus does nowadays.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, actually, when you look at the dwindling impact of the circus and the huge growth of interest in sort of clowns in healing. So it's really become a major area, I think, for us to investigate nowadays.
Well, yeah. So I'm curious. Could you share something about your book and what are the sort of key themes that you're exploring in there that would be kind of I don't know, get at the heart of what is this? What is it, and how it's growing?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of surprises that I experienced when I was working on this book and learning from the various different artists and professionals. And I can just sort of share a couple of them with you. One thing that happened that I found to be very instructive for me as a teacher in the classroom and someone who is really interested in the practice of clown in any environment. It was a conversation I had with a clown who works for the Dream Doctors. It's a medical and humanitarian clown organization in the Middle East. And he described his role in the hospital like this. He said, if I go into the hospital as a clown and I meet an environment that is chaotic, disordered, and in any way sort of dysregulated, then my job is to bring peace and serenity. But, he said, if I go into a hospital and I meet an environment that is static, tedious, and flat, then my job is to bring chaos and disorder. And that simple statement was, for me, like a profound insight into the role of the clown as an agent of opposition, of, as I mentioned before, topsy-turviness, reversal, which links back to many original clown practices that are sort of outside of the entertainment complex. And also alerted me to the fact that the clown's role is not actually predicated in laughter or humor. Now, joy is obviously a great byproduct of clowning, but really, reversal is about balancing things differently. so that any given norm, whether it's the norm of a hospital or the norm of a refugee camp, or honestly, the norm of my household or your household or a stage or a convention or an expectation, the clown's role is to just do the opposite, obviously without causing harm, and destruction is not necessarily in the clown's armory, although there have been some kind of gloriously destructive clowns. That guy used to smash watermelons, can't remember his name. But anyway, that kind of thing. But opposition is absolutely critical. So when I got that insight, I began to see the work of so many of these clowns in non-entertainment contexts as providing an alternative to the experience of the person that they're working with. A good example would be the Ukrainian clown, Jan Rogala, who works with this organization called Dr. Clown. And he told many harrowing stories, but he also shared that when he works with refugees in large shelters, he doesn't do a performance necessarily, but he does offer the sort of opportunity to make physical and emotional contact with a clown. He'll hug people if they want to be hugged. He'll talk to people that don't feel like they're being heard. Provides a kind of a conduit for feelings and emotions that are not being dealt with because there's so much trauma and stress. And he even described his role, and you'll enjoy this, I think, as being Ukraine's toilet, a place where people can bring their shit and he will flush it away. Figuratively speaking, when it comes to high levels of stress and trauma, it's kind of an amazing premise that the clown is capable of offering that level of relief. So there are other examples of humanitarian clowning that would fit the mold that we would expect a little more clearly, like groups like Clowns Without Borders actually produce shows, and they perform them in refugee camps, although the outcomes are not always what you and I would expect from a clown show. But I think deep down, this kind of profound concept that what we are doing as clowns is taking the temperature of an environment and then providing an alternative through play, creativity, extravagance, whatever it might be. That really, really opened things up for me. Even in the classroom, I found that to be really cool.
Yeah, I love that. That's all of what you said is very thought-provoking. And I just want to remind folks that if you want to jump into the chat and make comments, you'd be more than welcome, and questions for David as well. So you say reversal, but to me, balance and reversal is almost a like slightly different concepts. Balance, because it's like, it's not necessarily the opposite. It's the ability to shift something. To me, here's what I'm hearing from you. It's like, it's noticing what's present and noticing what's needed, and having the ability, having this kind of shamanic kind of ability to kind of shift the energy in a space.
That's right.
To bring in what's missing, and therefore to rediscover or regain balance where something had moved too far in a particular direction.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I think through reversal, balance is achieved. And think of a seesaw, and you put more weight over here and less over there, and you eventually find a place where a community or an environment has a little more sense of wholeness to it. Like, if there's too much sacred, we need more profane. If there's too much profanity, we need more sacred.
So, and sometimes that might involve going a little too far in the opposite direction
yes,
at first,
absolutely,
before you find that balance, maybe.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. And, there are risks involved, and that's part of the exhilaration of clowning. You're always slightly on the edge of something. So. Yeah. So, I mean, and I really resonate with the little bit of humanitarian clowning I've done with Clowns Without Borders. I felt like the most powerful moments were the interactions before and after the show. Yeah. And the show is maybe helpful as a catalyst or as an excuse to bring people together.
But then it's those kind of more intimate moments when you get to play and connect. And I suppose, well, it's really interesting, I suppose, when you really get into the technicalities of it with hospital clowning, you might find that the atmosphere or the energy is very different in different rooms or wards or parts of the hospital. It's not just the hospital. The whole hospital is
correct. Yeah.
You know, all stressed and over structured or whatever. It's probably going to be, you're going to find different situations wherever you go, and you have to be able to be very agile, and I guess to very quickly respond and provide and decide what's needed in the moment.
That's exactly right. You've got to be super adept. One of the founders of Doutores de Alegria, which is a Brazilian organization, Doctors of Joy, was previously a musical theater singer in New York, and eventually found his way into medical or hospital clowning. And the way he describes it rather pithily and wonderfully is, he said, I went from an audience of thousands to an audience of one. And that one member of the audience is the patient that he's working with. And when you, to your point, you know, every interaction is effectively a new show. So, you know, you're constantly shifting genres depending on the precise circumstance that you're entering into. Man, you know, people think that medical clowns just show up with a bunch of flowers and, you know, stomp around the hospital telling jokes, but it's so sophisticated and so much more liberating than that cliche.
What you're describing also makes me think about some of the humanitarian clown work of Patch Adams and Gesundheit. And I know I haven't worked with them, but descriptions of their missions in Iquitos and other places, it's, you know, it sounds, it's less like, you know, it's less performative, it's less skill based, and it's more about relationship.
That's exactly right.
And just being a space or an ear to listen in the right moment. That's
exactly right. And there's this, you know, we talked earlier about the kind of crucible of clowning, where in a clown classroom, everyone's being asked to face similar challenges and shed something. And in the end, among other things, there's a hope that our clowns have a nice, healthy helping of humility, that they're able to bring into situations like the ones we're talking about now, and not just kind of take center stage and show off. Naomi Schaefer, who was heavily involved in Clowns Without Borders USA, let me know, and it's in the book, that they can't really employ certain types of performers who are, you know, effectively limelight hoggers. It's not going to work in that context, although they may be absolutely brilliant at what they do. But she said that, you know, the child is always the star of any given Clowns Without Borders experience. And ideally not ideally, but frequently they end up on stage. And at that point, the trained professional, the clown, has to give way and figure out how to offer, you know, liberation to the child. So, yeah, there's a sensibility here that we're also kind of talking about, which is really critical, I think.
I love the flushing the shit down the toilet.
Well, it's nice and scatological, which has always had a place, right, in the clown world. So,
yeah, I use the metaphor of composting.
I like that too. Oh, that's good.
The compost, you know, because it's not just flushing it away. Then it's sort of like actually,
right.
It's like breaking it down.
Yeah.
And repurposing it for a positive use.
Exactly. Let the worms do their work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So beautiful. Well, it sounds like it's really a wonderful book, and everyone should just go out and buy it. And I'm sorry,
Well, yeah, you must. Yeah, it's called Send in the Clowns, Humanitarian Clowning in Crisis Zones. And I should mention there's a portion of the book that deals with what we called, for lack of a better term, activist clowning. People who work kind of in trouble spots of political and social unrest. And that's another part of the puzzle of the clown outside of the entertainment industry. Really fascinating work, and quite surprising as well. I always had the impression that an activist clown was just going to have my political point of view and was going to be standing at the front of the line with a placard waving it. I just made that ridiculous assumption. But, learning from people like Robin Hambrook and Jay Jordan and Hillary Ramsden, that's totally untrue. Like the clown's role, even in, moments where politically it would seem that there's a good guy and a bad guy, is to investigate liminal space, is to look at parody and mockery on all sides, and actually not necessarily to represent, a specific political point of view. I found that to be really, really extraordinary, actually. Pretty fascinating stuff. So
yeah. There's a few quotes, comments here, including Mike saying, "Brilliant quote, read the situational role of the hospital clown. Can we capture that somehow?" I don't know what you mean, Mike, by capture it. I mean, this is going to be on YouTube, so that's pretty much captured.
Can we put it in a bottle? Because I could put it in a bottle. Yeah. I mean,
do you remember what you said? Do you want to say it again?
No. I never remember what I said. I really enjoy that. At the end of class, someone will come up to me and say, "You know that thing you said about..."
You said, "I want to write it in my notebook."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Man, I love teasing people about writing stuff down. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I've heard more from you than I did from me, Barnaby. It's the flexibility, the adaptability, the kind of the inner elasticity that can allow a clown to go from one room, which might be bathed in tragedy, to another room, which might be, full of play, to another room, which might be just tedious as all get out, and to another room, by the way, which might have sort of, I would imagine this is the case regularly, some sort of medical preconditions that the clown has to work around. And there's so much skill that goes into knowing what you can and can't do, and what's right for any given patient. So, yeah.
Going back to the theme of the protest and the political clown, are you aware of any in LA right now with the?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I mean, what I have understood to be the biggest outbreak of activist clowning took place in Europe in the late sort of aughts, 2000s. And the organization that's represented in the book, which is my favorite acronym of all time, CIRCA, which stands for Clandestine Insurgent Rebel Clown Army, was very, very active and caused a number of branches of that kind of work to blossom around Europe. And Robin and Hillary are doing a lot of that work with their Rebel Clown Academy today. Yeah. But I haven't heard of it much in the United States, that there isn't necessarily a tradition of it.
No.
That I have experienced. Although there is plenty of, sort of counterculture, and there's a lot of use of creativity in the arts to sort of flip the switch. And some people have even argued that, LSD and that whole thing was sort of a clown movement and never named as such. But so there's definitely a tradition, or clearly there's a huge tradition of protest and creativity in the States. But I just haven't encountered many clowns.
Well, there's a lot there. I don't know if you've one of our Clown Spirit fellows, the fellowship that we had running last year, which incidentally is running again next year, this coming year, is that one of the fellows, Riley Soliner, who works at Camp Win a Rainbow every year, which was Wavy Gravy's. He said, in fact, Riley's parents founded Camp Win a Rainbow, and Riley is, in his 30s, but he grew up around Wavy Gravy and I'm forgetting what it's called, the pig farm.
I don't remember.
it's this kind of commune in the Bay Area where Wavy Gravy and his buddies all kind of hung out. It just sounds like the most incredible space of beautiful community and creativity and clowning. You know, they just were that they were all clowns, and they went off on these crazy road trips in buses all over Europe and performed and just did. They were extremely activist, politically, and capturing the clownish spirit in the and of course, you know, the use of psychedelics, I'm sure, was quite a major element of that as well. I was just thinking also about Larry Bogad. I'm wondering what's happening with Larry.
Well, Larry is he is in California. I think he's at UC Davis, maybe. I think he's there. I've never made contact with Larry. I only spoke to Jay. So, but I'm just couldn't answer whatever he might be up to. But,
I'm been trying to get hold of him for a Clown-versation.
Good. Yeah, that would be.
But awesome. He's not easy to get hold of. So if you're listening, Larry, get in touch with me. I'd love to talk to you. Yeah, and the stuff that that Robin and Hillary are doing over in the UK is super interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Having said that, there isn't a lot of protest clowning going on in LA, but there is a lot of clowning going on in LA, and I'm aware of it as kind of a hub right now that's really a burgeoning space for and I was wondering if we could sort of unpack that a little bit, because you know, you've got your amazing clown school, but there are like 2 or 3 other major clown schools and people, and they each sort of fill a slightly different niche, I feel.
Yes, and what I can do is warmly endorse the work of all these organizations without being able to speak in detail about exactly what they do, but because I'm not there. But the Idiot Workshop, it's run by John Gilkey, and Amrita Dalibor is there, and Zach Steele. That's a hugely influential LA-based organization, which, you know, is generating their own version of legions of clowns. They do a lot of live performance, and they have a group called the Poor Babes, I think they're called, who are regularly on stage with John. So that's a hub, huge hub. Then there's Clown Church, which is run by Jet Eveleth, which is a really wonderful organization. Phil Burgers, otherwise known as Dr. Brown, is often based in LA, not always, but he's regularly here. And then we have one thing that I think has really contributed to the huge sort of surge in the interest in practicing clowning is certain venues have become really central for presentations and performances and shows. One of those is called the Elysian Theater, which is close to Silver Lake. Then there's the Lyric Hyperion, which is in Silver Lake. And there's one other, that name is escaping me right now, but those 2 for sure are like, you know, major clown hubs themselves. And I think what's happening is that it's just kind of metastasizing in all directions. The Hollywood Fringe, for example, has often hosted a lot of clown shows. There's more than I can possibly count this year. Bunch of my students, bunch of other people's students, you know, it's everywhere. So I tend to think, without knowing in detail, but it's sort of an approximation, that the improv boom of 20 to 30 years ago is now sort of shifted over, and we're experiencing a clown boom instead. And LA was the hub of the former, and to a certain extent is the latter as well. So yeah, it's really exciting, actually. People are finding a lot to do here.
There's this kind of new format that Chad Damiani does.
Chad, I've got to say Chad, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's just monumentally influential and exciting. And he's doing the Chad Directs Live, or Live Directs.
Right.
Which is, you know, great for audiences, because they get to sort of see the interplay between the director or provocateur and the clowns. It's like watching a class, but better. Chad is huge here as well. So that's another big piece.
I'm really curious to see that, because in my own clown training with Sue Morrison, she would, you know, when we would open it up to the public at the end of a workshop and she would call it a soiree, you know, very genteel Canadian version.
I like that.
But she would be intervening in front of the audience.
Yeah.
So not quite as much as she would in the classroom,
Right.
probably, but particularly when somebody is having a hard time, or just from time to time, she's like side coaching and kind of helping out and providing some provocation in the right moments. But it was sort of, I'm imagining that with Chad and with other versions of this, it's much more proactive. It's like being like a director sometimes
I think, yeah, more like a capo comico from the commedia. Like you're running the show, you're in the show some of the time.
Yeah.
You're sensing the energy. Where should it go next? All this kind of. Gilkey is highly skilled at that as well. So yeah, I think it's become a sort of a new version of what it means to go see a show.
Yeah.
And definitely very electric here. In fact, it's funny you should bring it up, because only a few days ago I had a student say to me, "Why don't you do any live directing?" And I realized through that question, oh, it's really a thing now. It's like a formal thing, live directing. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a big part of it. I think LA as a city is, it's very open to new stuff typically, and is quite good at coming up with reconfigurations of things that are unique and special. So this is definitely, it's a vibe right here.
There's some more comments that have come in the last few minutes. We can just cast our eyes.
Sure.
Smoking Pencil says, the most important skill a clown can have is commitment. Even if the bit they're doing is not that impressive, if the clown plays it as if it were, it does 90% of the work.
Oh, I like that, because I do think that something that we often carry with us is a sense of caution, because we're worried we won't do it well or do it properly or have the right effect. And a big part of clowning is learning that commitment comes first, even if something goes horribly wrong. In fact, especially when something goes horribly wrong. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
I had a very fun example of this recently, where I was playing a sort of very pompous ringmaster, which comes quite naturally to me. I know you can't tell this from
to me, doesn't David, register, but anyway, yeah.
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic.
Neither can I.
Well played. And I had this moustache that was a handlebar moustache that I hadn't really attached properly, and it just kept falling off. And it became a thing. Because in the show, I was getting more and more irate with all the things falling apart, and my moustache was falling off.
Yeah.
And it wasn't planned at all, but it turned out to be one of the things that people afterwards were like, "That was brilliant."
Yeah.
Was
people
so
really
good.
love that. Costume malfunctions.
And they could sort of see that it was real. I think it was some, And then in the second show, I got some, somebody gave me some proper adhesive, and then it didn't come off anymore. And in some ways, the show was more slick in a number of ways, because it was like the second show and we knew what we were doing. My moustache didn't fall off, but it lost some of that raw, kind of screwing up, dealing with crises in the moment. It lost some of that edge.
Yeah, that stuff is fun. I think the moustache that isn't properly applied is I've seen it happen, and it just is inevitably delightful.
Yes.
But
you have to acknowledge it. Like if it was happening and I was like,
trying to ignore it,
trying to hide it or trying to keep going, so that the laughter, and it's interesting because it tells you something about what laughter is, in part, what its function is.
Well, I wonder if it's also relevant that you were playing, a relatively high status character, because the time that it's like going back 30 years, I did a Shakespeare comedy where an actor put a mustache on and it started coming off and it was hilarious. But I realized that he too was playing a high status character. And therefore, it did that thing that often we get through clowning, where it sort of brought you down to earth effectively. So I don't know if it would be the same if you were playing the lowest of the low. It might be different. I don't know.
Yeah, we should try that.
I guess we should.
Mike Mike says, yes, humility is the most important characteristic of the clown. He also says, get it in writing so we can pass it on. I'll rewatch it. He wants that thing about situational clowning.
Oh, good.
In writing. Yeah, Mike, write it down for us.
Yes, that's right. We'll sign it. You write it, we'll sign it.
Television Surgeon. I don't know who you are, Television Surgeon, but I like your YouTube name. Says, are there major differences? I'm going to put this one on the screen here. Are there major differences between traditional red-nosed clowning and the current LA clowning renaissance? I don't like saying that. I like saying renaissance.
Yeah, of course you do, because you're a
Brit. In David's view, what do you think about that?
That's a great question, and I suspect, well, it's a little bit tricky because what is the definition of traditional red-nosed clowning? It's hard to necessarily pin that down. But what I can say about the current LA clowning renaissance, Barnaby, is that it might appear to an onlooker to be a little more radical and risque than the word traditional typically implies. I can only be subjective about this. When I read traditional red-nosed clowning, I think about, I went to the circus the other day and I saw a red-nosed clown doing clown things in the circus. That's my association, and it was very family friendly. Whereas what's going on in LA is pretty out there, way further out there than even I always feel comfortable with. So it's got a lot of it's not so much that it's crude, because clowning could and should and frequently is crude in all contexts, but it's just very risky. So there's that. I think that is probably a notable difference. And of course, the other more prosaic comment that I could make is that not much of the current LA clowning performing scene involves the use of a red nose at all. My colleagues at Idiot Workshop will have to forgive me if I get this wrong, but I think that they don't use red noses over there. We do at the clown school. I guess we would fall into more of the traditional sort of bucket, and Idiot and Chad would be a little different.
But there is a sort of a judgment in the word traditional, right? That which, there can be, I think, by the way, Television Surgeon is Sean Boggs, who says,
oh, hi, Sean.
Clown school student. We know. Sean, I think that it's also maybe a mistake to kind of polarize or to create a binary here, because red-nosed clowning doesn't have to be traditional. So you can be doing red-nosed clowning, and it can look quite different from circus clowning.
That's right.
It can be quite innovative and experimental and edgy, and then there is this other brand of clowning which is emerging that's non-red nose, which is even a new genre, a new direction.
It's very radical. Although sometimes I think a little bit about I think it's because I read this somewhere, so it's not an original thought, but I wonder whether what's going on with Idiot Workshop has a sort of surrealist flavor, like an intentionally surrealist flavor. Maybe that may or may not be a word that would please them, but it's certainly, extraordinarily and rather brilliantly destructured. I guess it's like, again, I'm saying things that I don't know in detail, but maybe jazz is a little bit like this, where, you have sort of a central theme, but you don't quite know who's going to go off when, where, and how. And when it's done, I saw a version of it not long ago, and when it's done well, it's just utterly thrilling to witness, and it's very unstructured. And if I think about the clowns that I first learned about and grew to sort of love and respect, the Bill Irwins and the David Shiners of this world, their material is profoundly, tightly, like a Swiss clock. It's so beautifully organized and road tested. And utterly brilliant in its own way. But that's a skill set that is not necessarily de rigueur at the moment. Nowadays, it's much more about the sort of thrill of high-stakes improvisation and, where are we going to go next for the next moment? And I think that Idiot and Chad have really, really nailed that. It's kind of beautiful.
Interesting. I mean, and in some ways, the humanitarian clowning is in that ballpark, right? I mean,
there's a parallel there. Yeah, there is a parallel.
You know, or maybe it blends both kinds, because I think you also often with humanitarian hospital clowning, it's really helpful to bring specificity and a skill and some kind of like, some prepared material.
Absolutely.
That you can rely on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Gaulier said this or if it's just the sort of part of the movement that he was so instrumental in beginning, but the days of having high-level skills as a clown, whether as potentially as a mime, for example, Shiner as a brilliant mime, Nola Ray, spectacularly gifted mime, are well, I don't know if those days are dwindling, but those kinds of clowns are perhaps less common than the nouveau clown that tends to be devoid of any skill set other than the ability to work with an audience and constantly fail and fail again and sort of construct material out of that. But it's not a physical skill. So it's pretty interesting to think about. Clowning has become what I'd like to describe as a very broad church that absolutely anybody can walk into and get something out of.
Yeah.
And one could argue that it used to be much narrower and much more of a sort of field of skill-based study. Misha Usov, who I worked with a few times, who works Russian-based clown, or originally a Russian clown, I should say, who works with Cirque du Soleil, just has the most stunning abilities. He can juggle ping pong balls on his shoulder and his head. I mean, it's just nonsense what he's able to do. But that level of dedication and discipline is a different piece of the clown puzzle. And you might argue that that's more traditional as opposed to the sort of, wing it and sing it clown of today.
Yeah, and they don't always combine or cross over, do they? I mean, I can't really imagine Misha in like a live...
No, not at all.
...type scenario.
Not at all, exactly, yeah. So
he's one of those precise, crafts.
Exactly.
As a craft.
Crafts clown.
Crafts clown.
Yeah, that's something you could have a little piece of your village, a hut in your village could be for the crafts clowns.
Ooh, the craft hut.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm writing this down.
This happened here. I went to the circus the other day with my family. Had a great time. A family circus, right, in which everything was sort of super friendly to anyone aged 5 to 105. And I was reminded of something I've been thinking about for a long time, which goes back to this conversation about balance, because it was so extremely clear. There's no animals left in the circus now, which is great. So there are really only two types of act. In my humble opinion, this was definitely true in terms of what I saw the other day. One is the act where extraordinarily skilled people do everything within their power to defy gravity. Whether that's through the lens of juggling, unicycling, the ring thing, the silks, the wheel of death that goes around, and you're like, and the more extreme the defiance of gravity, the more dangerous it becomes. And your heart's in your mouth thinking, please don't slip, and it's part of the fun of seeing. That is, 80% of the circus is perfection taken to that level of brilliance. And then the only part that's left is the clown, who's a total numbnuts, who hasn't got any of those skills at all. I mean, even physically in this particular circus, the clown was completely different sort of physical stature to the other people, who was so extraordinarily toned. And also, I noticed, up close and personal, how the clown's work is community building. Perfection is sort of a lonely business, because I can't do the Wheel of Death. You can't do the Wheel of Death. There's like, 10 people in the world that can do that. But the clown invites children onto the stage to do a silly act, and then invites, adults onto the stage to do another silly act. And it's kind of the glue that helps to bind the whole experience by being the opposite of perfect and being the sort of average Joe, who's just like you and I, but a theatricalized version of us. And it's really cool to actually see that. They did it beautifully. And even my kids, who, knowing that I run a clown school are often very dubious about clowning, just because it's in their house and they don't want it. They said that their favorite part, or at least one of them said their favorite part of the show was the clown. And I was like, oh yeah, that guy really did his job so beautifully. So,
That's
perfection, interesting business, like, trying to be, or having the number of hours and the amount of experience to get something to a state of absolute magical exquisiteness. And then there's you and me. So.
Well, Cirque is a kind of an interesting example because it sort of lies somewhere in the middle as well. Cirque, they are doing these sort of very highly choreographed bits, and the actors are very skilled physical performers. But there are these moments where, at least in some of the shows, like Kuza, which I saw recently, where they bring people up from the audience and there's risk.
Yeah.
That's where the risk is.
Yeah.
Because it could go in any direction.
Yeah.
And you don't really know what that person's going to do. And their ability to kind of work in the moment is tested in those moments when and that's where also I think the audience is most like,
yeah, of course, on the edge of their seats. Exactly that. Yeah. That's directed by David China. Kuza is his.
Yeah. At what you said, I think about the clown being that kind of point of connection almost, or contact, or humanity for the audience, right? The point of accessibility, and I can connect with you because you're on my level. Reminds me also of the kind of more archetypal figure of trickster.
Yeah.
In mythology, who plays that role of the go-between often, because they're sort of a god and they're sort of a human, and they're often a go-between or a point of connection between those two worlds. They allow us to access the divine.
Absolutely, like a portal, right, through which to see things. Yeah,
like an interface somehow between those two extremes. And again, that brings us back to kind of in reversal and balance.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The Clown School Company, which is a sort of professional performing arm of the Clown School, is working currently on a show called Trickster, which takes a whole bunch of trickster stories and turns it into a show. So that topic is heavily on my mind.
Well, David, this feels like maybe a good moment to wrap up. So I feel like we've come full circle back to almost where we started.
Yeah.
And there's lots more we could talk about. We didn't even get to talk about your other book. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can leave that for another day.
We can, or people can read it. The clowns are way more eloquent than we are.
There is a Clown-versation I did with Ezra.
Yes.
Who is the co-author of that book.
Yeah.
And he had some great stories about some of the interviews you did. With some of the more difficult to find.
Ezra in particular left no stone unturned in his search for some of these people, which was really cool. But we had a great experience with that. So memorable stuff. Yeah.
Well, David, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And
always, thank you for all that you're doing, Barnaby, in this universe. To kind of bring people together through things like this and everything else you're doing. The huge conference you had recently, and it's so wonderful to make connections. That's what it's all about. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for your work, and long may it continue. Thank you for being at the cutting edge of the evolution of clown. I'm going to say goodbye.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Barnaby. Ridiculous crowd noises. It's like a children's birthday party crowd. Woo!
All right, that was David Bridel, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this Clown-versation. Next week, I'm going to have another one. It's going to be with Dean Evans, who's an amazing clown and bouffon performer, who's also going to be teaching a masterclass for us in August. So join me next week. There was a comment here in the chat that I just also want to draw attention to. Mike says Jeff Raz is emceeing a protest in Berkeley on Saturday. So that's cool. I just saw that. So maybe there is some clowning going on on the West Coast, not in LA, but in Berkeley. And you know, great opportunity for some clowning action on Saturday with Danielle's masterclass / workshop on Fool's Yoga. You could do that in the morning, and then you could go out and protest in the afternoon. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day today. Wherever you are in the world, keep doing the beautiful work you're doing. Check out clown-spirit.com and help us unleash as many clowns into the world as possible. See you all soon. Bye for now.